Welcome to the Historian's Eye podcast for Jackson Spielvogel's Western Civ textbook, 10th edition. Chapter 12, Recovery and Rebirth, the Age of the Renaissance. Beginning in Italy, the Renaissance, or Rebirth, was an era that rediscovered the culture of ancient Greece and Rome. It was also a time of recovery from the 14th century. The Renaissance had a more secular and individualistic ethos than medieval society. It might best be seen as evolutionary in its urban and commercial continuity from the High Middle Ages. In the North Sea, the Hanseatic League competed with merchants from the Mediterranean, where the Venetians had a commercial empire. In Florence, profits from the woolen industry were invested in banking. The aristocracy remained the ruling class, its ideals explicated in Castiglione's The Book of the Courtier. Peasants were still the vast majority, but serfdom and manorialism were dying out. The inhabitants of towns and cities formed an important minority, with merchants and bankers at the apex, and the unskilled workers, the unemployed, and slaves at the bottom. The father or husband dominated the entire family, and marriages were arranged for social and economic advantage. Wives were much younger than their husbands, with their primary function being to bear children. The mortality rate at childbirth and for infants and young children remained high. Italy was dominated by 5 major cities: the Duchy of Milan, Florence, and Venice, the Papal States, and the Kingdom of Naples. There were also other city-states that were centers of culture and where women played vital roles. At the end of the 15th century, Spain and France invaded and divided the peninsula. The concept of the new statecraft was exemplified in Niccolò Machiavelli's The Prince, which describes the methods of gaining and holding political power. Moral concerns are irrelevant, for the ends justify the means. Machiavelli died in 1527. There was increased emphasis on the human instead of the divine. Among the influential humanists was Petrarch, who died in 1374, in his advocacy of classical Latin writers. Civic humanism posited that the ideal citizen was not only an intellectual, but also a patriot, actively serving the state. And humanist education was to produce individuals of virtue and wisdom. The printing press was perfected, multiplying the availability of books. In art, the aim was to imitate nature by the use of realistic perspective. Masaccio, who died in 1428, Donatello, who died in 1466, and Michelangelo, who died in 1564, made Florence a focus of the arts. The high Renaissance of Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, who died in 1519, and Raphael, who died in 1520, combined natural realism with Platonic idealism. The artisan might become a great artist, and thus transform his social and economic status. It was the era of the new monarchies. In France, Louis XI, the Spider, who died in 1483, established a centralized state. England's Henry VII, who died in 1509, limited the private armies of the aristocracy, raised taxes, and left a more powerful monarchy. In Spain, Isabella, who died in 1504, and Ferdinand, who died in 1516, created a professional army and enforced religious uniformity by the conversion and expulsion of Jews and Muslims, all to aid in creating a unified state. The Holy Roman Empire remained weak, but the Habsburg emperors created a strong state of their own through numerous marriages. There were no new monarchies in Eastern Europe, but Russia's Ivan III, who died in 1505, ended Mongol control. Lastly, in 1453, the Ottoman Turks captured Constantinople. The church was besieged by problems. John Wycliffe, who died in 1384, and Jan Hus, who died in 1415, condemned the papacy for corruption, its temporal concerns, and demanded the Bible in the vernacular, or the local language. The popes reflected their era, and their secular involvements overshadowed their spiritual responsibilities. Some preferred war and politics to prayer and piety, and others ignored their vows of celibacy, ambitiously advancing their families over the needs of the faithful. Most were great patrons of the arts, but religious concern ranked behind the pleasures of this life.